Breaking moments ago, MS Now's Carol Leonnig and Ken Dilanian are reporting that the FBI has just fired at least 7 FBI agents and support staff as a result of their role in the classified documents case. This is involving records Donald Trump kept at his club at Mar-a-Lago. Now, that is according to 3 people familiar with the matter. An FBI spokesperson did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the terminations. Well, MS Now's senior investigative correspondent Carol Leonnig, who just broke that story, joins us. Also with us is Christina Greer, associate professor of political science at Fordham University. She's the author of How to Build a Democracy, From Fannie Lou Hamer and Barbara Jordan to Stacey Abrams.
Carol, please talk us through your reporting and which questions still remain.
Well, you know, Alicia, I thought we were done with FBI agents being fired en masse, but tonight we got a tip that, and it wasn't that hard to confirm, that multiple agents and some support staff, at least 7 agents, were fired in relationship to their role in the Mar-a-Lago, what's known as the Mar-a-Lago documents case. You'll remember the FBI opened an investigation after determining there was probable cause to believe that Donald Trump had top secret classified records at his club when he was no longer president after he had left the office in January of 2021. These individuals who were fired, we are told by sources, were fired because they played some role in seeking investigative materials and specifically phone records, metadata about the phone calls of Kash Patel, who is now the FBI director, and Susie Wiles, who is now the chief of staff for the White House. The choice of these firings now is interesting because the FBI director fired, or his predecessor fired, many FBI agents immediately after Donald Trump's inauguration. So the question arises, why now are these individuals considered suspect or unprofessional or violating their oath of office?
How does this play out then? I mean, what is it, because there's some concern about looking at the metadata related to Susie Wiles and Kash Patel at that time? Help us understand what the thing is that relates to the firing of these individuals.
Great question, Michael. And, you know, I know a thing or two about how Kash Patel and Susie Wiles were both being examined in this investigation back in the day when it started in February of 2022. The documents case took a lot of twists and turns during the Biden administration. But one of the things that the FBI was looking into was that Kash Patel made the claim famously in the summer, I believe it was May of 2022, that he had personally seen Donald Trump, when he was president, declassify a whole host of records. And the FBI was trying to figure out, was that a bogus claim, or was there any veracity to it? With regard to Susie Wiles, she was very prominently the head of Donald Trump's Political Action Committee when he was considering running for office again. And there was a tip the FBI was hunting down at the time of this classified documents probe when Trump was out of office and Biden was in office. The tip was that Donald Trump had been on a private plane with Susie Wiles and had shown her a classified document, which would be illegal to both have a highly classified document and show it to someone who did not have clearance to review it. So these are 2 potential reasons. We don't know yet, Michael. Mm-hmm. All we know is that these people have been fired. And one more detail, they were fired the same day or within 24 hours of a story breaking that revealed that Patel and Wiles' phone records had been obtained. Just the metadata of who they called, when they called them, nothing about the content.
Kash Patel is obviously out right now, folks. He has a statement to Reuters noting it is outrageous and deeply alarming that the previous FBI leadership secretly subpoenaed my own phone records, along with those of now White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, using flimsy pretexts and burying the entire process in prohibited case files designed to evade all oversight. That is how Director Patel is responding to this news. We will say on it. Look, there's something that Carol said, Christina, about the fact that Kash Patel years ago at this point said that he saw Donald Trump declassify these files. I used to work at the White House. You don't see the president declassify something. There's a process that it goes through. That being said, I do think there's something about the fact that there seems to be, if you're just a regular person sitting at home, turning on the TV, like, well, what did Kash Patel do now? It seems that there's so much chaos, so many things happening, yet no accountability in any way, shape, or form. Kash Patel's name is in the news a lot. Yet we haven't heard from Kash Patel. He wasn't at the State of the Union last night. He's putting out statements to Reuters and I believe has been on some conservative media, but he has yet to come before the American people, before Congress, and answer questions. I'm sure Carol Leonnig has a call in and has yet to hear from him.
Well, first things first, fantastic reporting by Carol and Ken. The way I see this as a political scientist and also as an American is that this is just part of the larger distraction tactic. When we're thinking about this mass firing, and you asked, why today, right? What we're not talking about is Kash Patel chugging a beer overseas on our dime. What we're not talking about is the Epstein debacle and missing files from supposed declassified files for Donald Trump, right? With people who have said that they knew him and saw him and all the things.
And I will note, Reuters even said they couldn't independently verify Kash Patel's claims that he gave to them in their statement.
Exactly. So all of the facts that we should be discussing, we're not talking about a disastrous State of the Union where the president just sort of skips over the fact that many Americans don't see cheaper prices for gas, for eggs, for home buying, how he said that we should pay more for your house, right? We're not talking about a State of the Union where it's the longest in history and he's unraveled and unhinged.
Hey,
and,
guys, am I free to go?
Absolutely disrespectful to a whole entire political party. What we are talking about is this sort of shocker of a mass firing. So it's this constant distraction with this administration that we've seen for the past year, where whenever we should be dissecting something that is in the moment, is incredibly important, they throw something else there. So now we can't talk about last night, which was incredibly important for the future of our democracy, where it's like, oh, I'll make a deal with Iran. Really? I think that we should actually spend more than 6 minutes talking about winning in hockey and maybe what this means for us internationally and domestically, fiscally, and also for our personal safety. But no, we can't even discuss that because now we have these mass firings that are coming on the heels of something that happened years ago that in of itself is incredibly important to discuss. So the exhaustion of it all, as Alicia sort of has laid out, is that the point of this administration is to keep us on our back heels constantly so we can't see what is in front of us. And I think a lot of people want a little more clarity on these Epstein files. I think a lot of people want a little more clarity on what the future of our nation looks like financially. I think a lot of people want a little more clarity about what the president did, not just during his first term, but in those 4 years when he was not in office. I think a lot of people want a little more clarity about, these false claims that he made all last night about election security, about how well we're doing as an economy. The list goes on. And now we have to talk about 7 people and their staff being fired.
Unfortunately for the president, we have walked and chewed gum at the same time. We're doing it all.
And it's why, Carol, I want you to just level set for us and remind us what things look like in normal times. Let's say there was a political vendetta inside a Department of Justice. These agents just get assigned to cases. Like these, of all the folks to hold responsible, holding the agents responsible, it doesn't even really make sense.
I have to agree, just based on reporting experience about the FBI and the Department of Justice, and specifically about this investigation that's allegedly at the core of why these individuals were fired. It didn't make sense when a host of DOJ employees who oversaw and were the premier experts on counterterrorism were fired, other than they played a role in investigations of Donald Trump, either on election interference or the classified documents case. And you're so right about FBI agents specifically because they are assigned by their supervisors to take these cases. It's not like they're jumping up and down and saying what they want to do and what they want to investigate. On top of that, toll records are really the most basic kind of record that the FBI obtains on the regular in any investigation to basically determine who was calling who are they in contact with, who's their circle. If you're looking into someone who puts up their hand and says, I saw the president declassify all these records, this investigation is a waste of time. Or if you have a lead that a top political ally of the president's saw classified records and was shown them by a former president. I'm going to underline one thing Christina said, if I may. I really appreciated what she said about the reporting, but also about keeping us on our back heels. I'm a reporter. I just try to get the facts, but the facts here are a little odd. The timing of this firing comes after Kash Patel, we are told, was in a little bit of hot water with the White House. Because while Donald Trump doesn't really have any big concern about Patel maybe flying around on the jet one or two more times than he maybe can arguably say was a business trip, he does not like drunkenness and heavy-duty drinking, and that's an allergic reaction that he has to that. We heard from the administration that Patel was in a bit of trouble. So it's really interesting that now the White House Chief of Staff, who makes all the decisions about personnel, ultimately, she's the final word. It's now interesting to see people fired in her name in defense of her, allegedly.
Donald Trump has mused and joked about third terms more than any president in history, and it gets less funny every time he does it. But that didn't stop him from doing so again in his State of the Union last night.
So in my first year of the second term, should be my third term, but strange things happen.
Look at little Mike Johnson chuckling there in the back. Of course, Trump lost in 2020. We all know that. He can't run again, at least not legally. But he's been dropping hints about what comes next for his party and his movement, no matter how obviously uncomfortable the options are. In his speech last night, Donald Trump also profusely praised his vice president, J.D. Vance, who once called him America's Hitler, I would note, as well as his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who once called him a con artist. Trump has also reportedly been polling advisors and confidants on which one of them should succeed him in 2028. So naturally, when I sat down with Governor Gavin Newsom, I asked him what he thought about those two potential MAGA successors. There are some people waiting in the wings in the MAGA world who would love to be the chosen ones of the Trump orbit. J.D. Vance is one of them. Marco Rubio is one of them. Do you think they can carry on the MAGA flame here?
No, but Vance, for whatever reason, scares me.
Why?
Almost more than Trump. I don't know. I just, I mean, talk about a guy who put a mask on and his face grew into it. I mean, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio were two of the most effective critics, just like that guy, what's his name, Graham, Lindsay, of Donald Trump. What frauds, what phonies. But J.D. is a unique fraud and phony, and he's a little more dangerous. And the folks around him, these are not folks that believe. I mean, listen to some of its biggest funders, the way they talk. There's a nihilism to the way they talk about the world. I know these guys. I literally know them, not figuratively know them. Some of them are in the book. Knew them back when. So, again, I don't want to be overly hyperbolic about this, but, you know, but that said, it's going to be hard for Trump. Trump still, you know, you think this guy is going to sit there in the Oval Office waiting for you to ask him a question and say, well, sir, Jen's not here. She's in Iowa with the debate with Vance. There's no damn way on earth. So he's going to try to run this out till right after the end until he can pick and choose who goes behind him. Or, God forbid, we don't take back the House of Representatives. He may be on that ballot.
He'll try.
I just wouldn't put it past him. I mean, look, what he does, it's the old adage, once a mind is stretched, it never goes back to its original form. What he does, he tests all this. He throws the stuff out, sees how you're going to react. If you don't react, all of a sudden it's socialized. Now it's normalized, and he'll just, you know, it's his. He'll keep taking it. So that's why it's so important that we not just say, oh, Trump's being Trump. Perhaps those are the most damning words in the English language right now. It's not Trump being Trump. You got to call it out. None of this is normal. It's unconscionable. And that's why the folks at Fox are such a disgrace, because they know better. And we don't think they know better. We know they know better. What was that big lawsuit where they had to settle? We saw all their emails. We saw all their text messages. We saw what they're saying behind his back. And they're complicit because they're making a ton of money, because that's all it's about. It's about their grift as well. Sorry, Jen. It's the world we're up against.
It's important. You've been calling it out for people to be clear-eyed about what he is capable of. You said this week there will not be a fair and free election in the United States of America as we know it unless we win back the House of Representatives in November. You've outlined this a bit, but what do you mean by that specifically? As people are trying to understand what that looks like, what does it look like in the season leading up to 2028?
Well, what is the one thing he connects all the dots to? The people he admires, they all have one thing in common. They're competitive authoritarians. I mean, Orban and Putin, the rest. I think Putin got, 87.3% of the last vote? They love elections. I said fair and free elections, the illusion of elections, the voting rolls. Pam Bondi tried to take them from California months and months ago. We're in litigation before she tried to do in exchange for troops moving out of Minnesota wanting the election rolls. What is that about? Wake up, folks. What's the SAVE Act about? Mm-hmm. I was just down in the South. It's not just about IDs. It's about registration. Who can vote? I mean, this is...
Puerto Rico.
This is... it's not blinking yellow. It's code red. Mm-hmm. It's happening faster than it happened in Hungary. It's happening faster than other takeovers in other countries, including Turkey. It's happening faster in real time. Look what's happening to media right now. Look what's happening. Mm-hmm. And it's the chill of free expression of speech. It's not what's said. It's now what's not said. The stories that are not being pursued. The contracts that are not going to be renewed. It's him telling Susan Rice she needs to resign or there's no merger. The hell is that? So much deeper than Kimmel. This is serious. Fair and free elections? How about democracy, freedom, free expression, free speech? All of it. Code red in this country. And my fear is we get so easily distracted and they're so effective on the other side. And so it's just, we must continue to be mindful, laser focused on what's in front of us every single day until the job is done.
The Constitution is very clear about Trump being able to run for a third term. And of course, states run elections. But you, as you said, you've grappled with this. You've thought about it. You dealt with some threats around Prop 50. What should every state be doing right now? What do you wish every state was doing to prepare for everything you just outlined?
Well, I think it's about a state of mind, of vigilance. They have to double down on all their voter protection. They have to double down on what the Registrar of Voters is doing and not doing as it relates to election security. And that's county by county. It's bottom up, not top down. States play a big role. Secretary of States do as well. But the registrars in each county play an even bigger one. We have to make sure, all of us, these campaigns, but also our party broadly, just people who believe the party, the red, white, and blue party, the Americans maintain their vigilance as it relates to legal defenses and strategies to make sure we call this out. We've got to push back against these purges of the voter rolls and the attacks on truth and trust. It's about creating so much distrust that he can create the conditions where then he can intervene and say, there shall not be, I'll tell Speaker Johnson, they may lose by 65 seats. Say, well, you won't sit any of them because we have proof in these 4 places that this was a rigged election, and try to play this out in the United States Supreme Court. And we already have 3 members that will literally are so supine. I mean, I don't even have, even my new Trump signature series knee pads are not large enough for those 3 justices. That's how real this is. It's happening on our watch. It's 2026. It's not 1906. It's not 1896.
The top story is the news that Donald Trump is accused in the Epstein files, and that his government is hiding the very Epstein files about it. NPR reporting that bombshell heading into the State of the Union, where President Trump faced the long shadow of Jeffrey Epstein. Indeed, it was one of these split-screen moments, depending on how you took in the State of the Union, because as I'm showing you right here in these photos, about a dozen Epstein survivors attended. and others showed their support for the survivors and transparency in various ways, including visible stickers and other insignia. Trump didn't even acknowledge them. And he didn't address what his administration is doing on this front or the big vote. Trump is hiding the files. That's according to credible, independent reporting. Trump is hiding the files according to lawmakers in both parties who have actually gone in to review them, the ones that they did release. And while politicos, people who follow this and say, okay, but isn't it obvious that Donald Trump would duck the issue in his speech because it's a weakness, even if it was the longest State of the Union ever, so he had time to hit all kinds of topics? But politically, people might say, why bring up your own weakness in the speech? But think about this tonight. His refusal to address the Epstein topic is still a total reversal from his recent campaign where Donald Trump ran on Epstein justice and transparency. He told interested MAGA podcasters more than once he would release the files, get to the bottom of this. I know that some people think it is cool to sound unexcited or kind of surprised and cynically just down with everything that's happening these days, but this is, if you look at the actual facts, a total reversal. And he didn't release the files, as he told those podcasters. He spent last year fighting it. Then he lost in Congress, which forced him to release millions under the new law. And yet he's still hiding the ones that implicate him, according to multiple reports. So Trump has dragged out this issue. He has actually made it last, angering MAGA supporters and Epstein victims alike. At this rate, Donald Trump's approach could ensure the Epstein issue haunts him through the rest of this year into the midterms, or maybe the rest of this last Trump term. So on substance, that's a betrayal of his promises. And on the politics, it is at a minimum odd, noticeably odd, and hurts his Republican Party. Unless you reason that maybe full transparency would hurt Trump even more. Remember, it's not so long ago that Trump was publicly and angrily denying even sending Epstein a birthday greeting, however, quote, bawdy or illicit, it's a card. He sued Fox News' sister outlet, The Journal, for even reporting that. And then I want to remind you what came after that. That might have just gone away, but then we got the birthday greeting here from an earlier file released via Congress that would corroborate the story. Trump has not dropped the lawsuit, which looks likely to lose. Trump likely to lose it, given the evidence you see on your screen. And Trump saying that thing that exists, that came directly from the Epstein estate, didn't happen and doesn't exist. It was also pretty big news when Trump's name first surfaced in some files. But those initial reports, deemed scandalous at the time, are dwarfed by the new reports this week of a possibly illegal DOJ cover-up of these FBI interviews with an Epstein-linked Trump accuser in these files. It's really something. And every time there's been more evidence, more files, and more information, it's gotten worse for Trump. But not just Trump. We follow this story, and obviously something wrapped up with the President of the United States and what looks like an ongoing cover-up by his Justice Department is a big deal. You would start there. You often cover these stories by starting at the top. But if you've watched our coverage, we continue to journalistically report on this wherever it leads, and it has hit many other individuals. You could pull together just the action of the last few weeks, and it's a lot. Powerful people in multiple countries linked to both parties in America, losing jobs, some losing their whole companies, facing legal probes, arrests in England. We keep updating this list, and it's just one way to see part of it in one picture. Right now, I'm going to show you another way to document this. Here is some of the news and the bombshells of just the past few weeks, reported by this and other news outlets in under 2 minutes.
We actually have some breaking news related to Jeffrey Epstein. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers is resigning his academic and faculty appointments at Harvard. The latest chapter in an extended fall from grace for the renowned economist over his extensive ties to Jeffrey Epstein.
Billionaire former Victoria's Secret CEO Les Wexner testified today in the House's investigation into Jeffrey Epstein.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was grilled by senators on Capitol Hill today over his appearance in recently released Epstein files.
Fallout from the Jeffrey Epstein files has now reached one of the largest investment banks in the world, Goldman Sachs. The bank's chief legal officer, Kathy Ruemmler, now says she is resigning.
New Epstein fallout. Hollywood heavyweight Casey Wasserman is putting his namesake talent agency up for sale.
Celebrity doctor Peter Attia has resigned as a contributor at CBS News. Documents show he exchanged messages with Epstein even after Epstein's 2008 conviction.
The fallout from the revelations in the Epstein files has now led to a 1 in 400-year event.
Start with breaking news about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The BBC understands that he has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office.
Regarding those links with the convicted paedophile, the late paedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
The biggest story in the world right now, that is the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
L'ex-prince Andrew, techniquement, membre de la famille royale.
Searches are currently ongoing at Royal Lodge.
There's a maximum sentence of life imprisonment for Andrew.
The first senior royal in modern history to be arrested.
In the past few days, revelations from the release of the Epstein files have nearly brought down a prime minister, implicated royals, and launched investigators around the world into action.
All those developments driven by the Epstein files that Congress forced the DOJ to release. And the pressure continues. A Nobel Prize-winning scientist out from a top Columbia Institute, Bill Gates, apologizing for his ties to Epstein while reiterating he never visited the island or joined any wrongdoing. A former governor, Democrat Bob Kerrey, out from an energy company board. And while Trump's secrecy may be all about Trump, former Governor Kerry is not the only Democrat facing heat for an Epstein link. The new files have ousted a top official for Democratic presidents, as mentioned, ex-Treasury Secretary Larry Summers. He had tried to already step back from the university he once ran, Harvard. But new today, the former boss is out, pushed to resign his teaching post that he had tried to salvage. Summers losing a role that was the capstone of his career, just as Democratic lawyer Kathy Ruemmler was recently ousted from the elite bank Goldman Sachs, mentioned in that montage we just showed you. Those are two people at the top of the Democratic Party punished for their Epstein ties, while Donald Trump and his Commerce Secretary, who lied and was caught visiting Epstein Island by the files, are resisting calls for accountability for them. But they have their own Epstein exposure. And if this were the end of the story, it might look like maybe Donald Trump outran this scandal too. But for many, including the legal process in the UK and elsewhere, this is the beginning. Those pieces of information and arrests and other accountability I just showed you are all in just these first weeks since the new files came out. Now, few people thought Republicans would join the effort to make Trump release the Epstein files that led to all this heat. If you go back, say, a year when Trump was riding high and fresh off his election. And that's just about a year ago. Maybe by this time next year, the pressure could build further. One survivor pressing the contradiction of President Trump avoiding any mention at the State of the Union of one of the most bipartisan sweeping actions Congress has actually taken in this past year.
All of the survivors have been advocating for months. We did help get an act of Congress, a bipartisan vote on the Epstein Files Transparency Act. I mean, that was an accomplishment that every American could celebrate, right? That was never brought up as part of this State of the Union. You know, there were opportunities and they weren't taken, and it is noted.
Trump campaigned on releasing the files. Then he famously, loudly, furiously fought against the thing he claimed to support. And then Congress made him do it anyway, and he released the files. And there was a day or two where he pretended to say he was for that in a very transparent political effort to spin the loss. Didn't really work. I think everyone knows what happened there. And the proof is in the State of the Union, because had he thought that he could continue spinning that, or if he genuinely thought this was a good thing he supported, he might mention it. It was the most bipartisan legal action the Congress took under this administration. It just happened to be against the Trump administration. He's hiding the files, only he can explain why. And he's hiding the fact that they released some of the files because apparently he's not proud of that. This story is not going away. not for some of the Democrats I mentioned there, who worked with President Clinton and others, and clearly not for the current president of the United States.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Donald Trump gave the longest State of the Union address in American history. He spoke for nearly 2 hours. It felt like 4. And it's even more impressive when you consider he did not have a lot of legislative victories to brag about. I mean, that's normally how these things are supposed to go, particularly when you've got unified governance, right? You tout all the bills you've signed into law, all the wonderful things you've done. But Trump has overseen one of the least productive Congresses in U.S. history. And that's even though his party controls both houses. And so he only actually mentioned one bill he passed last night, the budget-busting big bill that slashed public services and gave more tax breaks to corporations and billionaires. And he definitely neglected to mention one of the most consequential bills that he signed into law. That is the Epstein Files Transparency Act. That is a Donald Trump law. It has Donald J. Trump's signature right on it. He didn't mention it last night, of course, because he didn't want to pass that law. In fact, Speaker Mike Johnson shut down the House for months last summer and again in the fall in order to avoid delivering the votes to pass it. And then the whole thing was forced on Trump against his will by a near unanimous vote of Congress in both the House and the Senate. Then, once it was signed, the administration went out touting it.
This administration released over 3 million pages of documents, over 3 million, and Donald Trump signed that law to release all of those documents. He is the most transparent president in the nation's history.
The most transparent president in the nation's history. I want you to put a pin in that one. You see, because his Department of Justice has, of course, fought the law at every time. At every turn, they've slow-rolled the release of the files. They've cherry-picked them for political effect. They've been trying to put the Epstein story behind them because we all know Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were close friends for many years. That's not a secret. It's a matter of public record. We've seen the photos of them together, the video from one of their parties in the 1990s in which they're actually looking at women dancing in front of them. Of course, we've seen the birthday letter, which Trump somewhat hilariously denies writing to Epstein, with the gross drawing and the words, "Enigmas never age. May every day be another wonderful secret." So every time they act to cover up the Epstein files, they look like they're trying to keep a secret, like they're trying to cover something up. And now here we are with what is probably the most suspicious evidence of that yet. And it's really something. We're going to take a second here. So MS Now, along with other outlets, is now confirming that the Department of Justice under Donald Trump withheld some very specific Epstein files from the public. Those files are more than 50 pages of notes and memos related to interviews with a woman. That woman accused Donald Trump of sexually abusing her when she was a minor. The existence of those missing memos was first reported last week by independent journalist Roger Sollenberger in a Substack post. He discovered that a released document listed files in that case, and it showed that federal investigators had conducted not one, but 4 interviews with Trump's accuser in 2019 when he was president. And there were notes and summaries of each of those interviews within the FBI's possession. But as Sollenberger found, and MS Now confirmed, only one memo and no handwritten notes reflecting such an interview is included on the DOJ Epstein's file site. A source who's viewed the unredacted documents told MS Now the woman interviewed by the FBI in July 2019 is the same woman who alleged that Trump forced her to perform oral sex on him 35 years ago when she was 13 or 14 years old and subsequently hit her. She also claimed she was repeatedly raped by Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, according to the sole summary of her first interview, that's one of 4, but there's one that we do have, the one that was released that you can read, it's online. The woman's lawyer told investigators during that interview that she was concerned about implicating additional individuals beyond Epstein, specifically any that were well known, due to fear of retaliation. What did she tell them after that in those 3 subsequent interviews? We really don't know, because those documents do not exist in the files that Trump's Department of Justice posted. They exist in the FBI. They exist in the Justice Department. We can see that. We know that from the index, but they're not online. Now, Yesterday, the DOJ responded in a social media post saying that, quote, nothing has been deleted and all responsive documents have been produced. That, I gotta say, seems pretty clearly false. And in fact, as more outlets, I mean, first Sullenberger and then MS Now and NPR, and now the New York Times have started to report on these missing files, then the DOJ put out a news statement noting that documents could have been withheld because of an ongoing federal investigation, which is kind of weird phrasing. Could have been or were. Or is that just a rationalization for not releasing the files that specifically pertain to the man who's in charge of the country? That is not the only thing that did not make it into the DOJ's publicly released Epstein files. The FBI also interviewed a woman known as Jane, who testified under oath at the trial of Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. Jane claims she was introduced to Trump by Epstein at Mar-a-Lago when she was 14 years old. MS Now discovered that the handwritten notes from her interview also are missing from the DOJ's website. Now, Donald Trump has denied any wrongdoing whatsoever, and all of the allegations, specifically the allegation from this one woman, right, in question, who had the 4 interviews, only one we've seen, are unverified, right? All we have is this sort of reporting about the content of what she said and nothing underneath it. We don't know if any of it's corroborated at all. In part, that's because the files about the nature of the allegations are missing. We can't see them. We know Department of Justice has them, but they're not online. And we've been saying all along as we cover this, which has been a challenge, honestly, to do like rigorously and truthfully and fairly in these millions of documents as they come out. Just because someone's name is in the files doesn't make them guilty of a crime, doesn't even make them guilty of any wrongdoing whatsoever. There are lots of people's names in the files who have not been accused of anything. But here's what we know at this point. I mean, as best as we can tell with the information we've been given, it does seem clear that a woman did accuse Donald Trump of criminal wrongdoing in connection with his longtime friend, the child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. And then she was interviewed by the FBI in 2019 about what she said happened to her when she was 13 or 14. And then the files from those interviews were numbered and they were logged and they were put into an index. And then they were not released to the public. And the Department of Justice's explanation for why they weren't released to the public keeps shifting. So no, those allegations cannot be publicly verified, certainly as long as the Trump government withholds the files containing them. It's entirely possible these files exonerate the president of any wrongdoing. But then if they did, why wouldn't this government want them released?